Hello, in this video we're going to go over how to use your calculator for some of the financial math and statistics questions that we saw in the second part of our course. So the second part of quantitative literacy is fairly calculator heavy, and there's a lot of different steps to the questions, and sometimes it gets a little confusing on where to find all the important pieces. So in this video, using the final exam practice that is in Blackboard, I'm going to go over all the questions that you're going to want to rely solely on the calculator to help you find the answer. When you log into Blackboard and you scroll to the bottom where it says Final Exam Materials, when you click on that, you're going to see information about when your final exam is and some of the rules, and you can read through this later on. It's in Blackboard and in your email. But you're also going to see two practice final exams. I'm going to look at the practice final exam from Spring 19. That's the most recent. The one from Fall 2017 is similar, but the one that you're going to be taking on Monday is most like the one from Spring 19. When you open it up, you can see that there's 40 questions, and there's an answer key at the end that tells you what section you can find the answer, that type of material in, and what the title of that section was. I've already pulled out the questions that are a little bit more challenging, and they're primarily from the stats section and the financial math section. So we're looking at chapters 5 and 4. For chapter 5, it was a lot of mean, median, and mode, right? These were all about measures of center and variation. And it's not that it's difficult to find it by hand most of the time, but just that it's time consuming. The big thing that we used in the chapter 5 section is called 1var stats, and we find that underneath the stat menu. But before we can use 1var stats to find the mean, the median, the mode, and standard deviation, most importantly standard deviation, we got to get that data in. So when you see long list of data, it's not there for you to just kind of explore. It's for you to answer the question. You're always, when you have a long list of data, going to have to get this data in your calculator. I'm going to go through the steps to find the mean and the median on the calculator, even though the one you see here in 16 and 17 are fairly easy to do by hand. It will give you some extra practice for where and how to get this data in to the calculator for the ones that you can't do by hand, like standard deviation. So let's turn on the calculator. I'm going to hit Stat and then Enter on Edit so that I can pull up my list. I have stuff in List 1, so I'm going to arrow up and highlight the L1 and then hit Clear, Enter. You want to make sure L1 is still there. You clear the table, you don't delete the table. Now to get my data in, all I have to do is hit the button. All right, 20, enter, another 20, enter, 14, enter, 12. Once all my data is in, I hit second mode to go to the main screen. Now I'm going to run the program that gives me almost all of the measures of center and variation. Stat, over to Calc, 1var stats. Hit enter. I have an older calculator, so your screen may look a little bit different. On the newer screens, it will say list and frequency. You want in list to be L1. If it doesn't say L1, you hit second 1 and L1 will pop up. You want frequency to be a 1 or completely blank, and then go down to calculate, enter. If you have an old calculator, you don't have to put in the L1. It will default to L1. Hit enter, and X bar, this first one up top, that's your mean. It won't say mean, it will say X bar. And so my answer for number 16 is 16B. For the median, I'm going to have to change all my data, so I have to go back to Stat, Enter on Edit, and then I could either clear this out, or I could type right over it. You could do that also. I'm going to type in the new data, and then hit second mode to go to the main screen. Now I need to run 1var stats again. So Stat, Calc, enter on 1var stats, and then it should all be set up for you to go. Once it's set up with the L1 and the list and 1 in the frequency, you don't have to change it. It should stay in. So I'll hit enter, and the median, I have to scroll down, is MED. So that's 21. My median is 21. That's also a part of my 5-number summary. Now, you can see in number 18, there's a lot more numbers. So this is something that you probably don't want to have to do by hand. And you can see that they're not in numerical order. So it's going to be a little bit of a pain by hand. So I'm going to use my calculator, stat, enter. I'm just going to write right over this. And I'm going to go down the column. So 690, 728, 530, 549. The nice thing about the calculator is that it does not need to be in numerical order. You can type it in any order. If you accidentally miss one, you can go back and put it at the end. Not a big deal. Where if you're doing it by hand, it has to be in numerical order. Usually we go from smallest to largest number, but it could be largest to smallest. And I'm making up some numbers here. 645, 620, 463. There we go. And if you miss a number, it throws everything off. Where in the calculator, it's going to do all of that for you. Got all my numbers in, so I'm going to say second mode, and then stat, calc, 1vars, enter. And I need to scroll down, and then min to max. That's my 5-number summary. So 463, 539.5, 632.5, 709, 826. It looks like my answer is A. That's my 5-number summary. Now, even that isn't too terrible if you just really forget and you can't do it by hand. You don't know where to go in the calculator and you get stuck doing it by hand. Standard deviation, the formula is ridiculous, and even only 6 numbers will probably take you about 5 minutes to do this question. So you really have to use the calculator. I'm going to go stat edit. This time I'm going to clear out my list because I have a lot more numbers in there than I have on number 19. 3, 5, 2 6s, a 9, and a 1. Second mode, and then you know where to go. Stat, calc, 1vars. And my standard deviation is always the one with the S, 2.8 when I round to the tenths. I know that there's 2 here, and we don't do a whole lot about what the difference between these 2 standard deviations are. There is a slight difference, which is why they're close, but as you can see, they are not the same, and they never will be unless it's a 0. You always want the S. SX is the standard deviation. So that's 2.8, not the 2.5. That's a big one to remember. SX is the one that you want for standard deviation. And those were all the calculator questions that you would see for Chapter 5. In Chapter 6, you can use the calculator to find area underneath the curve and percentile, but you won't be required to do that on the exam. I'm going to provide you with a sheet that you can look up the percentiles. So now for the really challenging part for most people, and that is the financial math. A lot of you guys use the formulas and did a fantastic job on the labs. But the formulas are very time consuming, or maybe you use Google or Excel or some other software program to help you find it, which is totally fine in the real world, right? If this was your job, you would have all of those tools. But since we're looking to make sure that you have the big ideas, you're not going to have access to all of those tools. You're only going to have your calculator. But the good news is that these questions are much more simple. They are much more straightforward than the ones that you would see on the lab or even in your homework because you don't have a lot of those tools. Number 36. I got $1,200. I put it in an account that earns an APR of 4%. It's compounded quarterly for 2 years. Now you could do this in the TVM solver, but honestly it's probably not worth it. What you want to do here is use principal 1 plus R over N to the NT, and that's going to give you the amount that's in the account after all said and done. So really it's a matter of just typing this into the calculator and not actually using the TVM solver. Quarterly means 4 times a year, so N is 4. I'm going to bring this, let me write it down here first. My principal is 1200. The 1 is a part of the formula. R is 0.04 because that's my percent for the APR as a decimal, divided by N. And then up here I have N times T. Bring up my calculator and slide it to the other side. So I have 1200 times 1 plus the 0.04 divided by 4. Now, if you have an old calculator, if you write 4 times 2, it's going to give you the wrong answer. You can't say this. That's not going to work. You either need to, if you have an old calculator, put it in parentheses, or you know that 4 times 2 is 8, and just go ahead and type in the 8. And I've deleted everything, so now I need to type it all over again. If you have a new calculator and you can see what's in your exponent and what's not, then it's not as bad. You could tell if the 2 is in the wrong spot. But if you have an old calculator, you're going to want to find out what this value is first, if it's something you can't do in your head, and then type it in. How much money will I have in 2 years? I'll have $12.99 and 43 cents, so that would be C. So you could use the TVM solver. That's probably more than what you need. However, 37, you definitely want to use the TVM. Anything that is like, hey, you're doing this every month. I'm putting $192 away every single month. So my principal is going up. And then I'm also going to have to pull in the old interest from the month before. That goes a part of the principal that earns more interest, right? So you got a lot of moving parts. And when you have a couple of moving parts, you're going to want to use the TVM solver. I'm going to have to go back to the other side. The TVM solver is in apps. Hit enter on finance, enter on TVM. N is the number of times that you're going to have a compound. So this is compounded monthly at 5%. And you're going to do this for 19 years. So for 19 years, every month you're going to get a compound. It's compounded at 5%. In savings plans, the PV, the present value, is 0, right? You open the account and the account had nothing in it when you opened it, right? That's how you open an account. So that's 0, but every month you're going to put away $192. We don't know what the future value is. That's what we're looking to find out. But we're going to do this for 12 periods of year, and it's going to compound for 12 periods a year. Our PY and CY will always be 12. I'm going to clear that out. I need to make sure that that is completely empty, not a 0, not a decimal point, but nothing in there but the blankie. And then hit alpha, enter to solve. And in 19 years, I'll have a little over 72,834. Okay, so I only have one number that matches. This part here is what kind of trips people up sometimes. So this part of the question says, compare this amount to the total amount of deposits made over the period of time. So for 19 years, every month, you put away $192. You, out of your own pocket, put $43,776 into the account, but you cashed out $72,834.57. That extra money, that little over $29,000, that's all interest that you earned just by putting it in the bank. That's what that second part of the question asks. 38 is going the exact opposite way. I want to find out what the monthly payment is if I have a home mortgage at $99,000. So how much am I going to have to pay off this loan? Where in 37, you knew how much money you were putting in, and you were going from the 0 up to a dollar amount. So for this one, for the TVM solver, it's a mortgage of 15 years, and they like to get their money every month, so that's times 12 at 3.6%. When you're paying things off, the present value is high, right? So when you first buy the house, the amount of the mortgage is the full thing, the $99,000. In the future, it will be all paid off, and the value of the note will be 0. The question is, how much money do you have to pay every single month to make sure that that happens? So now I got to clear that out. Alpha, enter. $712.61. Oh, here it is. I didn't see it. Letter C. So that's going to be your mortgage payment every single month. Similar situation on 39. You have a credit card balance of $3,200. You want to pay it off. We want to figure out what our monthly payment is. We're going to assume that we make no additional charges to the card. So it's a little bit more like a loan than, say, a credit card where you could pay pretty much anything you want every month as long as it's more than the minimum and you can keep adding to that balance. We're going to kind of pretend that this was kind of like a small car loan instead of a credit card. I want to pay it off in 2 years. I'm going to make a payment every month. Credit card interest rates are really, really high. 21 is not that unheard of. Right now, your balance is at $3,200. It's going to go down to zero when you pay it off. What do you have to pay every month to make sure that happens? Alpha, enter, $164.43. Your total monthly payment, your total payments that you made to the card, if you were to calculate what you paid them every month, right? $164.43 for 2 years every month. That's how much you paid them, even though the balance on your card when you started this journey was only $3,200. Right? It cost you almost an extra $750. So those types of questions, when you have mortgages and you have loans and you have savings plans, those are all going to be TVM solver type things. You can use the formulas, but it's much more complicated with the formulas. Now, there is one more question I want to look at that doesn't really require the calculator program, but can be a pain. And that is, of course, the tax question. Taxes are bad news in general. The good news is that this is actually a pretty short question. It doesn't look like it, but it will be a short question. You have the tax table, and you don't have to go through a whole lot of work to come up with the tax owed because we're jumping straight to the taxable income, right? So Kelly and Kurt, they're married, they're filing jointly, $83,634. I'm going to write it up here. $83,634 is their taxable income. They're married, finally, jointly. They fall in to this tax bracket because they're more than $75,000, but they're less than the $153,100, right? So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3 pieces that I'm going to have to calculate. They're going to have to pay the 10% on the first $18,650. Then they're going to have to pay 15% on the amount that falls in between the $18,650 and the $75,900. So like the next almost $60,000, they're going to have to pay 15% tax on that. So $75,900 minus the $18,650. So if you imagine like counting out dollars, so they count out all that money up to $18,650, 10% comes off that. Then from they're going to keep counting. So $18,651 up to this amount, right? All of these dollars that are in here in that range, 15% is going to come off that range, right? The distance between there. How many dollars do you have in between 18 and change and 75 and change? Finally, I'm not going to go up to 153. They shouldn't have to pay tax on 150,000 because they didn't make 150,000. So now I just got to go up to the 863. Every dollar over the 75,900 up to the 83,634. If you imagine counting these out into piles, I got to take out the 75,900 because they already paid tax on that. Once I figure that out, I'll be able to figure out what their tax owed is. So 10% of 18,650 plus 15% of the amount of dollars that are between the cap of the second one and the cap of the first one. Plus how much money, their personal cap, right? Not the cap that's here because they didn't make that. It's how much up to their amount and then subtract out the dollars they already paid tax on. And they have $12,386. $12,386. That's how much their tax bill is. So that's what they're responsible for paying the government. Now, hopefully through their jobs, they've already paid this, right? And when you file your tax, you say, oh, you already took all of that out of my paycheck every week. And in fact, I paid more than that. So anything over this is a refund. If Kelly and Kurt only paid like 11 grand in taxes, they're going to have to come up with some more money because now they owe. Those are the calculator heavy questions on the test. If you can go through these, then you are in good shape and you are prepared for your final. I'm just going to scoot back for a minute. Please remember that your final is Monday, December 9th at 5:30. If you can't make it till 6, that's fine because I know some of you guys are coming from work. Please bring your own calculator. You can write on the test. You'll need a pencil for the Scantron, and we're going to stop at 8:30. You have 2.5 hours for the exam. You can have a cheat sheet. I will provide you with the conversions, but not formulas. So if you're like, no, I hate the TVM solver, I really want to use all those crazy formulas, you better write them down on your cheat sheet. On your cheat sheet, you can also write cheat notes about how to use a TVM solver, and that might make your life a little bit easier. I will see you on Monday.